to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
Hey listeners, we have a great show for you this week. In episode 95, I break it into two main parts. In part one, you will hear from my friend Alan Phillips, who acts as a guest host for the show. Alan interviews me as I share my journey and preparation for the StrongFirst Level 2 Kettlebell Certification. In part two, I did an impromptu interview with my friend Dr. Matt Rice, who also attended the StrongFirst Level 2 Kettlebell Certification with me. Matt and I sit down after the weekend to provide real-time, raw feedback for you. So, here are three things that you will learn by listening to this episode. 1. Why I made the choice to lose 30 pounds and go from 211 pounds down to 181 pounds. You'll also learn how I did this safely and methodically through proper diet and training. The second thing you will learn is the impact endurance training has on strength training. And the third and final thing is Dr. Matt Rice and my feedback on the demands and experience of the StrongFirst Level 2 Kettlebell Certification and how it deepens your kettlebell practice. Without further ado, let's roll to episode 95. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast. I am not Joe DeLeo. I am Alan Phillips, and I'll be guest hosting this episode with a special guest, Joe DeLeo. Joe, welcome to your podcast.
Thanks, Alan. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It'll be fun kind of being on the other side of the mic and giving the audience a chance to get to know me a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk mostly about the StrongFirst Level 2 certification coming up, which you'll be doing a couple days from now. We'll release this after you go through the certification. But I know there's been a lot of demand when you've posted stuff on social media, people asking about your preparation. And overall, there's really not a lot of material out there on the Level 2 course. Mm-hmm. So it'll be good to get your perspective both beforehand, and hopefully we can get together afterward and do an after-action review.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to be kind of share my journey, the ups, downs, bumps in the roads and stuff, and what I felt has worked well for me and some things I've learned along the way. So it'll be a lot of fun. Absolutely.
So before we get to the Level 2, let's have you tell us about your journey through the StrongFirst system to this point.
Sure. So in August 2015, I attended and passed the Level 1 StrongFirst Kettlebell Cert. So Phil Scarito, Master Phil Scarito, led that one at Chief Fitness in Boston. And then the following year, I did the bodyweight cert in the spring. Phil also led that one. And then was kind of choosing between doing the Level 2 or going for the SFL. And I kind of took a lot of time to think about that. And then so the other thing that was going on is I moved from Syracuse, New York. Literally, I finished up the Level 1. And after I finished up the Level 1 in Boston, I drove down to Providence. So my car was like full of all my personal belongings and stuff. And I showed up at my new apartment with my girlfriend at the time, now my fiance. And it was like the first time I saw my apartment. So it was like a really kind of a big weekend. And then this weekend, getting ready for the Level 2, I fly out tomorrow afternoon, and I am now coming to you from Kansas City, Missouri. So we have moved again. We relocated at the beginning of August of 2017. So I got some new digs I'm sitting in.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll talk about some of how that your move has played into your preparation, some of the things you've had to deal with recovery and making changes to your training plan. But going back a little bit, you mentioned deciding between the SFL and the SFG II. Can you tell us what shifted your decision toward the SFG II? what's your why with this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So, I wanted to continue to deepen my knowledge of the kettlebell. Love the barbell. Love the barbell. We'll pursue that at some point in the future. But there's just so much out there in terms of the kettlebell. You have different systems, the strong school strength, StrongFirst, hard style, and then you have the Gear Boy Sport. And to be a good coach, you don't necessarily have to coach both styles, but I think it's important to, from an education standpoint, to know about each one and the differences and how to demonstrate technique in both, because you might come across that situation in a coaching situation. So I really wanted to just continue to pursue and learn as much as possible about the kettlebell. So that's why I decided to pursue the level 2.
Awesome. So when did you actually begin your specific prep for the level 2? And before you get into kind of the timeline, can you just give us a big general overview of what your preparation entails? And we'll get into sets and reps and specifics as we go on.
Yeah.
Just kind of the big overview to start off.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I finished up the SFB in the spring of 2016, I did not pass at the certification. So I had to submit a video for that, and I passed in sometime in August. So it took me like an additional 4 months or so to get the one arm, one leg push up. And then after that, I kind of took a couple months just to do some sort of GPP, doing simple and sinister, just doing get-ups and swings to just kind of give my mind and body a break a little bit and kind of step back and figure out what I wanted to do. So once I had decided I wanted to pursue the level 2, at one point at the very beginning, I had kind of a very crazy idea of trying to train the handstand push-up solely to try to get a half body weight press, which I think is a great complementary and accessory exercise, but I think it would be very difficult to train strictly the body weight lift and have that translate to the level of strength you need for a half body weight military press. So I was playing with that from probably December 2016, January into February for about 3 months, and was making very good progress with the handstand push-up, but I kind of hit a ceiling in terms of it translating over to the military press. And so I realized, there's just kind of no replicating being under the belt. So I made that switch and started doing some rite of passage programming and just, one day a week getting in a good amount of volume. And then the other day of the week, I would do some heavier pressing, just singles and doubles. And then some other days in there, I sprinkled in some work with get-ups to just kind of build the overhead stability and getting your body used to being under tension for a long amount of time. And then probably April, I hit. I'd have to go back and check my Instagram feed, which is kind of weird to say, but I think it was around April I hit the 36 kg for the first time for one rep. And that was after going through, I think I did maybe 4, maybe 5 ladders with the 28. And then I was doing, singles and doubles with the 32. Hit a 1 rep max at 36. And then my thought process was just to go up to the 32 and start trying to build a ton of volume with that. And I quickly found out that as you're going up in bell sizes, it gets exponentially harder, and you can't just make these jumps of, doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reps in a ladder. It's just, at least for me, that's been my experience. It wasn't something I could replicate in a ladder format. So, kind of was at a impasse for a while with my training. Was stuck at the 36. and reached out to my really good friend and mentor, Brent Morehouse, who's in the Syracuse, New York area, as a SFG level 2, and then also competes in gear voice sport, and has a really... Yeah, go ahead.
And also as a prior guest on the podcast, had a really good synopsis of his level 2 last year. So be sure to check that out, listeners, if you haven't heard that episode.
Yes, and I'll. That's a good tie-in. I'll make sure I put a link to that in the show notes and stuff when we do the write-up. But Brent's got a really strong and high-level endurance background. He was a Cat 1 national level cyclist, really, really good endurance athlete. And so we started having some conversations, and he started coaching me. And part of the reason I wanted to work with him was because of his endurance background. Having been a rower for 2 decades has kind of played a big part into my physiology and how I need to approach strength training. Because I definitely am more probably of an endurance lifter than a straight power lifter. And I'll kind of explain a little bit more about that, what I mean by that later on. So Brent, we met up in May in person because I was in Syracuse for a wedding, and got some coaching in person and stuff. And then he started kind of writing my program and started working with the 28 and the 32, and just, really starting to focus on the bell size 32 kilogram and knocking out doubles and triples. And then slowly, over the weeks, working up volume. So by the end of June, I was, just starting to hit like 4 reps. And then again, I have to go back and check Instagram. Probably sometime in July, I was able to hit 5. And then right around then, the other factor into the half body weight presses, of course, is your body weight. So the other thing to note about this, and I apologize if I'm jumping around, is when I started really getting coaching from Brent right around May 1st, I was 211 pounds. So as of this morning, September 20th, like 2 days before I get to Philly, I'm 184 pounds. So I just, yeah.
Yeah, and so the 200 at 211 pounds, you would have had to press the 44 or the beast.
The beast. Yep. So my 1 rep max at that point in time was 36 kg. So I'd have to go another 3 bell sizes. I knew, given the timeline, that was pretty unrealistic. So I had made the decision to at least be pressing the 44, to be under 203. So in May, I started running about 1 to 2 times per week, and my weight came down pretty quickly. And almost all of the aerobic work I did, I would say like 99%, was strictly aerobic work, using the Maffetone method. So 180 minus your heart rate, and then you adjust based on like the 3 or 4 variables he talks about, whether you've had an injury, have been sick. If you've been training, then you can add 5 or 10 beats depending on kind of your training history. And that's primarily what I was doing. I was doing just sort of endurance work, running, some rowing on the rowing machine, and then my strength training sessions, really focusing on the military press. Did not spend any time in May, June, and July working too much on the level 2 skills, just because I had so much room to make up in terms of hitting the military press standard for my body weight. So about July, making good progress with the press. Like I said, I hit around 5 reps, somewhere around there in that month. And I took a trip to New York City to meet up with our chief SFB, Karen Smith, to work on a project with her, which will be coming out soon. and was able to stop by 5 Points and work with her a little bit and get some coaching. And at that point, I was about 196, 197 pounds. And I started getting this idea in my head, well, what about just dropping down to 185 and pressing the 40 instead of the 44? And asked a lot of people in the StrongFirst community, talked to Jason and Lauren Pack at Achieve Fitness that perform better and just asked them. Talked to Brent about that. Talked to you. Talked to Karen. Talked to some others. And then also at the beginning of that month, I had the opportunity to do a second interview with Dr. Stuart McGill. And so we talked a lot about rowers and enhancing athleticism in rowers. And that conversation kind of played a big factor into my decision and what to do next. So a big part of that conversation was talking about strength rowers and elastic rowers and just the type of athlete you are and how you are utilizing your body to generate energy in the rowing stroke. So me, I'm about just under 6'3", and when I was rowing in college, I was about 185 pounds. So I'd been that lean before, but it had been some time, and I was training about 6 days a week. But as I was getting heavier and pressing heavier for the military press, it became, we started to notice, even just cleaning, I started to develop a really pretty serious side lean. And based on that conversation with Stu and having conversations with Brent, as well as based on my family's medical history, I have some family members that are pretty overweight. I made the decision to get down to 185. Because I felt long-term health benefits were much better for me. And two, it became clear as I was trying to get to the 40 and jump from the 36 to the 40, I was really having a hard time. And I was, at least at this point in time, I'm kind of approaching really my physiological limit. And so if anybody's not familiar with rowing, if you're a guy that's 6'3", and you're in a boat in an 8 matching up with guys that are 6'6", 6'7", you got to row long. And you have to match up through the water with those other athletes that are naturally much taller than you. And you can't, height's not a skill you can teach. It's, we're given that by our parents. So I would have to really get long and get out over the boat at the catch position. And then at the release, I would lay back a lot more to match up body angles with those athletes. So as a result of doing that over so many years, I'm a pretty kind of slinky, elastic guy. I can get into positions. And so that was one of the major factors, especially in terms of how that played into the military press and all of the offset weight and the offset center of gravity with the bigger bells was really having an impact on my pressing groove. So that was one of the big reasons I made that decision. So, go ahead.
Yeah, interesting. It's, I know we've had some conversations offline with some of the stuff you've discussed with Professor McGill, and I think there's a very much untapped realm that we can explore in all of our training to incorporate some of those concepts. I know he's known as kind of like the back guy, but there's a lot more that we can go into that's presently untapped.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thing I'll mention is, I think it'd be accurate to say that Stu has a pretty big affinity and love for rowers because his wife, Catherine, is a rower, and she was on the Canadian women's national rowing team in the 1980s and is a phenomenal masters athlete. I think she just went down, her and her sister were down in Tennessee or somewhere in the South and came home with a bunch of gold medals and hardware.
Nice.
Again. And so he has some excellent insight into working and training with rowers. So, I've been very, very blessed and fortunate to have had the opportunity to have some conversations with him and learn from him. And so, that conversation, and then also talking to Brent, I had some concerns about really being able to successfully press the 44 and get there, not necessarily in time for the level 2, but how is that going to kind of change my athletic makeup? Because, I love working with endurance athletes, and it was kind of taking me, some of those qualities you need for a military press are taking me further away from being a good endurance athlete. So, and what I mean by that is not necessarily that you're going to be slower, right, or less powerful, but typically, generally, if you look at a lot of endurance athletes, they are not massive individuals. They're pretty lean in body mass. They don't carry a lot of weight, whether you're talking about rowing, cycling, triathlon, but they can generate a lot of power per pound of body weight. They can. And so that's one of the things I was looking at. This would also be a really interesting experience for me to be able to turn around on the coaching front and help people that are endurance athletes. So that was a very small part in the decision. So anyway, so I started really ramping up and integrating more running into the training program. And at the end of July, we were getting ready to move from Providence, Rhode Island to Kansas City, Missouri. So in this cloud above my head, I'm trying to make moving preparations, travel 1,200 miles, keep up with training several days a week, and then start to look for a job in the Kansas City, Missouri area. So, it's not busy at all. We passed through Syracuse. So let me back up. So sometime in July, I hit 5 reps with the 32 kg. And then the week after, I was able to hit 36 kg times 2, which is the most I'd ever pressed at. And was able to again hit 32 by 5. And at that point, I was still probably right around 195. And so I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to get down to 185. I got plenty of time, 2.5 months. And, we were also getting ready to transition from Providence, Rhode Island to Kansas City. So we started that move at the end of July. And we took about a week to drive out. We stopped in Syracuse for 2 or 3 days. I got some in-person coaching from Brent again. And then we kind of continued the journey, to the Midwest, stopping in Indiana, Illinois, and then eventually ended up in Missouri. And so we were in an Airbnb for 10 days before we moved into our rental. So we didn't get into our house that we're renting now, our condo rental, until August 15th. So I was on the road for literally a straight 2.5, 3 weeks, living out of a suitcase. And
did you have any bell access or other equipment?
Yeah, great question, man. So I brought a 24, a 28, a 32, and a 36 in the car with me, as well as all a bunch of our clothes and stuff. And I can tell you right now, that is not make your car gas mileage friendly, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
So you saw there were some clips I posted on Instagram. I would break up the ride. Nellie, my fiance, she's great. She's humors me, lets me stop off on the side of the road, find a park, and get in a quick kettlebell session for 30 to 40 minutes. And I look like some sort of, crazy Yahoo. This guy's getting out of his car and these parents and kids are looking at me on the jungle gym. What is this? What is this guy doing? So just, I had to pull back because, I was dealing with a lot of stressors that I mentioned there. The move, job, looking for a job, packing, being in a car, not sleeping in your own bed, totally disrupted the training schedule.
And that even goes back before some of these stressors. They go back even before you embarked physically on the journey. You've been dealing with a lot of these stressors that have impacted your training for months, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So what prompted the move from Providence, Rhode Island to Kansas City is my fiance got a full-time attending position at KUMC as a neuropathologist. So she focuses on working with other doctors and doing research on all the different neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, CTE, that type of thing. So that's what brought us out to the Midwest. So the reason for the move was her being able to get a visa. And so that was like another kind of big stressor working in the background and stuff. And luckily everything, worked out. So that was something that was just sort of, behind the scenes that we were both kind of, grappling with the entire time.
So can you get into going back to when you were in Providence? Can you talk about how some of the adjustments you made kind of day to day with your training? I know you've been on a written program and you have, this number of sets, this number of reps per day. Can you talk about how you might have modified that at all? Or if you just said, you know what, it's on the paper, I'm just going to plow through. What did you do to kind of accommodate the stressors? Yeah,
well, the short answer is I've done both. And I learned very quickly that when you're going the route of trying to get a 1 rep max, whether it's the military press or deadlifting and stuff, Brent said this best. It's not like being an endurance athlete. If you're kind of feeling off and you're working in your upper ranges of a bell for a lift or, barbell like deadlifts or whatever, if you're working in your upper ranges, 85, 90, 95% or getting close to your 1 rep max and you're not feeling good that day, you are better off putting the weights down and walking away and coming back the next day. Whereas on the endurance front, you can get away with a little bit more. You can still kind of push through and it might not be a great training session, but you can still kind of hit your numbers and speeds. At least that's been my experience as a rowing athlete. Being able to kind of command my body to perform a certain way. But there's something very humbling about getting under, the heavier bell or heavier weight and your body's just like, nope. You do not have the neural drive today. That's not going anywhere. And so I really, I had some lessons where I would try to force myself to press certain amount of reps in a set or a certain bell size, and I wouldn't hit it on a day. And Brent and I had a lot of conversations about that, and I just had to learn to start to step back and either drop down to a lower bell size or just say, I'm not recovered enough for this session today and come back tomorrow.
Now, did you have any particular metrics that you would use in terms of in your warm up? Would you say, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm good to go for pressing, or did you have just any subjective sort of measures that you look at?
Yeah, so a couple. So when we met up in May, we took a look at my overhead position for the press. So thoracic extension, shoulder flexion, shoulder extension, and then also, he looked at scapulohumeral rhythm, how the scapula was moving across the rib cage and making sure that it was moving up as my arms extended up. So, I got reacquainted with a lacrosse ball and foam roller and had to work out some kind of sticky trigger points that I had around my shoulder blades in the delt, upper trap, that were presenting some restrictions. So that became part of the movement prep at the beginning and warming up. But to address your main question, the other part of that I really started to pay attention to was the speed of the bell during the reps. And this is a great kind of tie into some of the principles of StrongFirst. Is, in SFB, you'll hear Karen talk a lot about neural drive and feed forward tension, right? And so as the bell speed's starting to decrease, that is either that's a very good indicator that your neural drive between the sets, you didn't recover enough if you're doing during a training session, or during the warm up, you're a little bit off, because the bell speed at certain bell sizes like 20, 24, 28, it should be pretty smooth and steady. And then as you get into, say, reps like 4 or 5, what I found is, of course, fatigue's going to be building during the set, and the bell speed will start to slow down a little bit. That's kind of natural. But if it slows down to the point where, like, you basically have just kind of, exhausted all of your neural drive, you could very quickly end your training session, which I did a couple times. And that's just part of the learning experience of realizing, you really got to kind of key into when your body is ready and when it's not, and honor it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm just thinking too about some of the points you had mentioned before about elasticity, and when you're talking about rowing, it would seem like, and this isn't necessarily scientific, I'm just thinking about thinking off the top of my head, but for an elastic athlete like yourself, and I'm thinking about myself too, that the speed would be even more critical than, say, someone who's more of a grinder, because, like, for me, for instance, the toughest part of the press is getting it, of a heavy press, is getting it out of the rack. That first part where it involves a lot of velocity. So if you lose that, it's tough to save it at the end. Whereas someone who's more of a grinder, they can push through that. Absolutely.
And that right there is kind of one of the other reasons. So, what we found that was really interesting is I got to that point where I was hitting 5 reps with the 32, 2 reps with the 36. I could not punch through to 40. And so I tried again when I got to that benchmark. And I talked to some of the fellow SFGs like Kevin Dia and Jimmy Wan. When I was in New York City, there was a SFG going on that weekend when I met up with Karen. And I talked to them a little bit about it and just kind of getting their insight. And I had a training session where I hit 14 singles of the 36 kg, but I still couldn't punch over to the 40. And so what Brent and I kind of started looking at was how, I'm very much an endurance lifter. Like, I need to hit higher reps at a certain bell size to get that next level of strength up to my 1 rep max. So I'm not saying this is equate, but a good benchmark that people said was, or if you could hit 2 to 3 reps of 36 or 5 reps, with the 32, you should be in a pretty good position to press the 40. That was the case for me. So I kind of realized, like, I'm probably going to need to be hitting, at least 6 reps with the 32 and at least 3 reps with the 36. That's what I thought anyway. So, so that was kind of a big learning experience right there with that going through, because to your point, I'm not a grinder lifter. Both of us are kind of more on the explosive side where, we're rowing, you have literally a dry phase and a recovery phase. So there's a work phase and a relaxation phase. Very much kind of like the kettlebell swing. So you're really kind of as McGill would say, there's a lot of pulsing going on during that rowing stroke. That's not the military press. The military press is one big grind, especially as you get up to your 1 rep max. And so the other thing that's kind of important to note, just reading Ultimate Back Fitness and Performance, and then Mike Boyle's the new edition, new functional training, and the first interview I did with Stu. Rowers are not overhead athletes, so I am very much kind of fighting some of my physiology, having spent so many years in a position of forward flexion and using my spine more like a gas whip versus a concrete rebar or steel rebar rod.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So I want to go back to the bell for a second. And can you talk about anything that you've done to make the 40 feel somewhat comfortable, even before you were able to actually military press it? Some of whether you've done push pressing or carries or rack holds.
So well, I haven't pressed the 40 yet. I'm still, that's important to note. So it's September 20th, down to 184, as I mentioned earlier. So along the way, this probably is not a shocker to everyone listening, but I lost some strength as my body weight got down. So going into this weekend, I know I'm going to have a very amazing on day to hit the 40, but in all likelihood, I'm probably going to be working on my military press after this weekend, which is fine. I'm perfectly okay with that.
And you learned you learned a lot from the experience of the SFB, having to take some extra time, and from conversations offline, you've mentioned several times that it was almost a better thing that you were forced to go through that grind afterward than if you had managed to get it done on site.
Yes. Yeah. Cause it really forced me to, for the 1 arm, 1 leg, it really forced me to pick apart, all the areas that I was, deficient or weak in, and I had to address those. And that's kind of just been personal growth for me. I look at these, these are certifications, but I really kind of consider them almost like an athletic event. That's my mindset. I prepare for them that way, and I take it very seriously. And when you're around people that you admire and you respect and your colleagues, you want to hold your own. You want to represent yourself well. So to answer your question about getting used to the 40, so we did some, very kind of short complexes of like 1 arm swing clean, or 1 arm swing front squat clean. 1 arm swing clean front squat. Getting time in the rack, the push press with the 40, and so 2-3 weeks ago I push pressed the 40. But I haven't been able to press the 40 yet. So that's a great lift, I think, to help to tie together just getting used to getting that bell overhead and keeping it along a similar path of your military press groove.
Yeah, what sort of technical cues do you typically think about with your military press? Yeah.
So the other part I wanted to back up, because this is actually really important and a huge learning point. So one of the other things that I started working on a lot actually was the clean. So if you don't have a good clean, you're not going to have good press. And I'm probably not surprising anyone by saying that. But I really started to play around with the position of the handle. And so I actually took a day where I just did strictly clean practice with heavier bells. And I changed it from the kind of inverted V, V or the parallel handle kind of style or setup, excuse me. And what I wanted to look at both on video and how it felt was how the bell was getting to the rack and how it was settling in the rack. Because what we started to notice as I was pressing, for a long time I was cleaning from an inverted V position. So, I'm sorry, not inverted V, from a V position. So my thumb was pointed back. And so with my thumb pointed back, the bell actually had to travel a little bit more because your thumb's pointed back. It's going to finish with your thumb pointing straight at you. So the bell's actually rotating a little bit more. And so during the skill practice, I took video and I watched the bell, and it wasn't settling right away in the rack position. And then I looked at it at the parallel position and then inverted V, so with my thumb kind of pointed up at the 45-degree angle. And what I found was it was much tighter arc. The bell had to rotate less, and it was settling into the rack position less. So that actually was super important to help me set up for the military press portion. And so I spent a lot of time. I went back just kind of working on that, and I changed the setup. So I went from a V thumb pointed down to an inverted V position with the thumb pointed up at a 45-degree angle, and really tightened up my clean.
And how about once you get to the clean? Any particular cues that you're thinking about getting the bell out?
So I think a lot about some of the cues and tension and visualization from the SFB and the one arm, one leg. Because in some ways they're very sort of movements that have a ton of carryover and crossover in terms of what you're doing with your body. So the first is I really like to think about, once I get into the rack position, from the waist down, getting as tight as possible. So, of course, glutes, you're squeezing your glutes, abs are braced. I really like to think like I am trying to drive my feet through the floor and stand up tall, because as you start to press, the bell's going to want to try to bend you down. So that's how I like to think about getting that wedge is from the lower body down and really pushing through the feet hard. And then the other thing I like to think about with my feet is I actually almost like to think about like I'm spreading the floor and creating a wider base.
Yeah, speaking of the width, I know you've made some changes to your stance as you've gone along. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, you and Nikki Schlazer, I submitted a video clip, I think it was for the 40 kg attempt back in beginning of July. And you put a side-by-side photo, or maybe it was a video clip, but it showed me pressing, and I had a wider stance in one and a narrower stance in the other. And so that's one thing I've done is I've made sure that I'm no wider than shoulder width. Because when I started, for whatever reason, just getting sloppy or not being mindful of it, I started getting a little bit wider with my foot stance. And so I was actually starting to leak tension, and that was translating me into missing reps.
And I also noticed too, when you were in that width or that wider position, it was a lot tougher for you to get that a little bit of that lean to stack underneath the bell, and you're pretty much pressing it outside the width of your body almost.
Yep, that's a great point. And it gets really awkward.
Especially under 88 pounds.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it just feels weird, you don't have any control in that position. So, that was those are some big adjustments, both of the clean and the foot position. And we
now
no, go ahead.
Yeah, so for the clean, is that just for your 1 rep max military press, or have you changed your clean strategy across the board?
Good question. So it's changed actually across the board. So if I'm doing a single arm military press, it's all like it would be set up for an inverted V, thumbs pointed at a 45-degree angle. And the other thing too is not just the angle of the handle, but the hand position. So I've played around with sliding the hands or the thumbs, or the palm of the hands closer to the top or to the bottom or right in the middle. And this is a very individual thing. What I found to work for me in helping to tighten up the press and the groove may not work for other people. You got to play around with it. It's very particular, because you also need to realize where your hand position is going to affect how the bell's sitting on your wrist and on your forearm and how it's going to be in the rack. So this is the part I forgot. So as I was pressing, we started to notice that the bell was starting to move. So I wasn't pressing from a fixed point. So as I would start to press, the bell would start to move and wobble. So that's makes it 10 times harder, because now you've got this giant mass and it's moving around and you're trying to get it over your head. So I had to really work on getting that hand position tightened up so that as I began the press, the bell was static. My arm was moving up, but the bell wasn't wiggling. So that's another good thing to focus on right there. And I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. What was your question?
I think I forgot too, but that was a great explanation though. So one other thing with the grip.
Sorry, Alan. Yeah. So I changed the clean for all of the. So if I do double bell work now, it's inverted V, because the arc's a lot tighter. Mm-hmm. So I went back to video and I went back to watching the bells rotate around the forearm and how much time it took, and also just listening if it was quieter, because that's energy. Mm-hmm. So what I found for me is that having my thumbs kind of up, pointed at that 45-degree angle, the arc was tighter. I got the elbow connected to the rib cage quicker, and the bell settled into the rack position faster. Again, this is just for me. This doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody.
Yeah, and those particular cues might not work for other people, but I think that the bigger point is that we can't overlook the way the bell is actually sitting on our wrist, and that every bell, or not every bell, but different types of bells will be different. Yeah. And the bell that you're going to press at the certification might be a little different than what you have at home. And that's why we often see, beast tamers and Iron Maidens bring their own bell for that challenge.
Yeah, man.
And so, just that little bit of difference in the pressure on your forearm and the angle of your hand can really make a huge difference in your ability to actually make the lift.
100%. Yeah, and so that's why, when you start to really look at the training for the 1 rep max, programming is important, sets and reps, but I would actually encourage people to spend more time up front focusing on finding what works for your military press. So play around with the setup for the clean, getting the bell to sit in the rack position the way you feel most comfortable. That's going to allow you to press, and play around with different bell sizes, because it's going to change a little bit as you get up there. You know what I mean? Because the bigger that bell gets, you're getting more offset center of gravity pulling you. You've got to really be able to get that bell inserted deep across the palm. So those are important things to kind of figure out, because that'll affect your ability to hit the reps like you're talking about.
Yeah, and we often hear the saying in StrongFirst community, and I'm not sure who first came up with it. It might have been Fabio, but the setup is your first rep, and everything you spoke about there totally goes to that concept.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it's forced me to really kind of work on all those details, much like I had to do with the one arm, one leg. And then the other thing I'll say too, you asked earlier about the press, like what I think about. The other thing that this sounds counterintuitive, but one thing that Brent pointed out to me and Mark Rifkin pointed out when I submitted a video on one of the groups on Facebook, StrongFirst Training Practice, I think. I was flying out of the rack position, and you have to have confidence to not necessarily like pause and wait for like 5 seconds, but to have that coming from a stable position, meaning the bell has stopped moving, because that's the other thing that was messing me up. So my hand position might be good, but if the bell hasn't stopped and it's still wiggling just a little bit, and you go to start your press, now all of a sudden I go to start the press, and now my wrist wants to turn, and now the bell's like wrapping back around my wrist, and that's a junk rep. I just lost that rep completely. So being a little bit more patient in the rack position and really feeling those first couple inches, again, to your point, focusing on accelerating it up and getting it moving quickly, but not rushing it, right? So there's two different things. We're talking about moving the bell speed quickly, but not necessarily rushing the rep.
Right. Because one of the things people do wrong sometimes is it's a balance, because one of the things that people do wrong sometimes is they'll clean it and kind of shimmy around and wait, and 3 seconds are going by while you're under tension of a big bell, and it's going to make it a lot tougher. But on the other hand, as you've been saying, you don't want to get so fast that you don't have a good platform to press from.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, the only way I learned that was doing it. Like I would get into the rack position. I'd be like, all right, it's a bigger bell. I got to get this thing out of here, man. I got to go. And I would go to start pressing, and it was good. Bell speeds move, my forearms moving up pretty good. And then all of a sudden I got this big bell. It's like getting ready to say hi to me. It's wrapping around, and all of a sudden now, instead of staying on the outside of my forearm, it's like moving around. I completely would lose positioning. And so that's what I meant. Like, it sounds counterintuitive, but you've got to have the confidence to just stick with it and grind and be patient at the beginning.
Absolutely. And I think that's great advice for really any of the lifts. And this has been extraordinarily insightful on the military press. We might have set a record for the longest podcast talking about the kettlebell military press.
I know.
Point. So if there's obviously other lifts that come into play during the level 2. So let's talk about those for a little bit. So so we have the windmill, the bent press, the push press, the clean and jerk, and the double snatch. Yep. Can you talk about some of your experiences in preparation for those?
Yeah, so this will be a good way to kind of tie everything together. So, so we'll tie this kind of back into the timeline. So hopefully this will paint a little bit of a picture. So again, we got into Kansas City August 5th. We're in Airbnb for 10 days and stuff. So I'm like staying with our Airbnb host, doing kettlebell workouts in front of her garage, which you saw on Instagram and stuff, looking like a little bit of a Yahoo in the neighborhood. But at that point, body weight was starting to come down. It was probably around like 192 or so. I could go back and check, because that's the other thing I wanted to mention real quick. So 211 pounds, May 1st. Yes, I was doing aerobic runs. I didn't mention this earlier. I wish I did. I've completely dialed in my diet and nutrition. So I've been very, very smart. The difference between being 185 pounds in college and now was that I would just do, 2 to 3 hours of cardio 5 to 6 days a week for training. And I did no strength training in college. We did none. And the difference now is I watch my calories. I've logged every single meal. And I've been very calculated and intelligent about making sure I'm getting enough protein. So my target body weight was 185. So 1 gram per pound of target body weight. So I'm trying to shoot for 185 grams of protein a day. And then based on what I felt I needed during the day, I would adjust to the appropriate amount for carbohydrate and fat. But I just want to make it clear, just because I've lost a ton of body weight, I did not starve myself to get down here. I went about it very methodically, very intelligently, very patiently to get here. I didn't go to bed hungry any night during this process. So yes, other skills. So in August, we started integrating some of the double bell work. And so we kind of took an opportunity to kind of alternate. We do a week strictly doing, 3 to 4 sessions of just double bell work, or working on the SFG level 2 skills during some of those sessions. And then the following week would be focused more on the military press. And at that point, I was still we had stepped back and taken a more play approach to training, just because I didn't know what time I was going to be able to work out. I didn't know how much time I was going to have. So to try to make those high quality sessions, we made the decision, Brent and I made the decision to kind of take some of the constraints that having a formal program can do to you, and feeling like you need to get everything in, and being like, okay, you're going to focus on these skills and make them quality reps and get in what you can in the time that you have. So again, the focus of quality never left, but I had to be sort of very open and fluid to what I could do on the day and during the week. So we started focusing on the double skills. I had to work a lot on the jerk, because probably for most people that second dip is a little awkward. It's a little weird, kind of getting used to that. So I would, grab and use the lighter pair of bells, a pair of 16s, which might surprise people. They think that's very light. And spend a lot of time with them just in the overhead position, and do the knee dip, multiple knee dips, and just get used to having the bells overhead. And then go to, my snatch size pair of 24s, and then do the jerk. And I would break apart the skill, just focusing on the first dip, pausing in the first dip, and then exploding up, and then resting in the second dip. And then slowly tying the skill together to make it more fluid. The bent press and windmill, have, stayed in touch with those. I haven't trained them a ton. I have really good thoracic rotation because of rowing. I've always been able to maintain that pretty well. So just sort of getting more comfortable with the foot positioning, and just learning how to execute the movement especially for the bent press was fine. The windmill, got great advice from Karen when I saw her in New York City. I adjusted to a much narrower foot stance, which allowed me to keep the weight on the back leg and, really shift and hinge through the rear hip while getting that T-spine rotation. And then, double snatch, I just treated completely as a skill. So I just sprinkled that in here and there, because with all the training you're doing for the level 2, you're cleaning the bell a ton for the military press. So your clean should be really good. Hopefully it is. Same thing with the double bells. For all the level 2 skills, you're doing the double clean all the time. So I didn't take time to train that specific skill. I would throw in, maybe as a finisher, front squats and some double swings, doing that. I really like that one. I did when I worked with Karen. But the double snatch, I would just treat it like a skill and throw in a couple sets of 2 or 3 by 5, just working on really good technique, being explosive, getting the bells up and overhead, making it as light and effortless as possible.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you describe most of your practice with these other skills as pretty much skill practice, which is in somewhat of a contrast to the way most people have to prepare for level 1, which is more volume based and learning to tolerate more kind of endurance stuff. Whereas in level 2, and I get asked this question a lot, like how does level 1 different from level 2? Is level 2 is a lot more skill based. There's lower reps. It's not, okay, we're going to swing the bell 1,000 times this weekend. It's really dialing in the finer points of these lifts.
Totally. Yeah. And, I've had a big carryover from doing all of the running and aerobic work. My cardiovascular system is very, very well developed right now. I'm in a really good spot. So, I've lost some top end strength in getting down to the lower body weight. But in terms of during a training session, when we're doing a lot of the ballistics, I'm not out of breath at all. So one of the sessions I did last week, the snatch work, I did with the lighter bell. I did it with a 16 kg, but it was 100 reps continuous, switch every 10 reps. And I think I did that in 347 or something. And then 2 or 3 weeks ago, I did a snatch test with the 24 kg, I did 80 reps and did that well under 4 minutes. So I'm not worried about, that component because I've had training in some of the other areas. The running has helped a lot with the conditioning and the ability to get my heart rate back down very quickly from some of that. And that's helped a lot with some of the explosive movements for the push press and the jerk getting overhead. During the set, if you're doing 3, 4, 5 reps, your heart rate's coming up, your breathing's starting to move a little bit more quickly. But once I set the bells back down on the ground, I shake it out fast and loose, it comes back down really quickly. So conditioning-wise, I feel really good. Like I said, I'll be working on some of the top-end strength probably after this weekend.
And you alluded to another point in terms of the carryover too, that just all that practice preparing for the 1 rep max military press carries over so well, not even just in the specific aspects of the other lifts, but just having that strength to manage a 88 or 96 or whatever pound bell you're having to deal with.
100%. Yeah, you just said it. I mean, if you're hitting or close to hitting, in my opinion, your half body weight, or for women, your third body weight military press, you will have the strength to be doing the double bell work. The conditioning component is just going to be coming from just doing it over time and being consistent and getting in frequent practice. But you don't need to do, I don't feel like I've needed to do a ton of volume. You know what I mean? And one of the things we did for conditioning was we would string together some complexes where I would do, take a lighter bell and I would be using that bell nonstop. So I would go maybe swing to snatch to reverse Turkish get up, come back up, do it again, continuous, and then repeat on the other side and do that 3 times through. So you're moving continuous nonstop. So it's a lighter load. It's not but you're still moving continuous. It's a lot of time under a lighter amount of tension. You get a lot of conditioning, and again, you're building resistance to fatigue. I'm not necessarily concerned, with trying to do it with a snatch size bell for a complex like that, because I'm just trying to work on being more conditioned.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is some great information regarding the level 2. And unless you have anything else, any closing thoughts on the level 2 prep, I think it's time to move on to the rapid fire.
No, I'm good. I mean, the only thing I'll throw out there is, I'm excited for this weekend. I'm rooming with my buddy Matt Rice. Matt's coming in from California. So the one thing that we're going to do that's going to kind of tie all this together is, so Friday night, the night before the first day, Saturday night, and then Sunday night, I think we're going to do like 15 to 20 minutes. And that way we can get a inside experience in the moment, very raw and unedited, while like fresh in our minds, like what we just, the night before, what we went through day one, what we went through after the cert, and get it down and record it. And I'm going to, that'll be an episode as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And for the listeners out there, if you have any questions that we didn't address regarding the level 2 or really anything about the kettlebell, that you'd like addressed in the future, we can certainly address those when we have another follow-up when you get back home.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
All right. So now it's on to the infamous rapid fire round where you get to be on the other side of the mic this time. Are you ready?
Boy. Yeah, I'm ready. We'll see.
How many times have you done these to your guests? Episode?
Oh, well, not counting the ones that are unpublished, over 90 now. Yeah, okay. So I'm in the 90s.
All right, so the first time answering the rapid fire, so here we go. So what advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago?
Oh, man. So I'm 32 now. I'd be 22. So just finished college. So I would be leaving GW, getting ready to head up to, it's 2017? No, I'm sorry. I'd be getting ready to start my senior year in college. Yeah. So what I would say is follow your passions. It took me probably a little bit longer to figure that out. I was a sport and event management major in college. So if I could go back, I would have probably integrated something in exercise science into my education, formal education. But yeah, just follow your passions. If you are going to do what makes you happy, success will find you. Success will find you. Everything will be fine.
Awesome. What's your favorite strength training exercise?
The get up.
How has your training changed today compared to 10 years ago?
Wow. How much time do you have? The short way to answer that is, I came from a college rowing program mentality where it was every day was race day. Balls to the wall, go as hard as you can. And there's something to being said for knowing how to immediately be able to put in a hard type of effort and demand that from yourself physically and psychologically and mentally, and how to get to that place very quickly in a race to perform. But from a training perspective, I've learned a lot more about how to wave the load, to listen to my body, that rest and recovery are what make me stronger and faster and more powerful. And, I'm not weak because I decide that I want to take a day off and sleep or just relax. Learning a lot more about how adaptation occurs and stuff. Yeah, that's been super helpful. Those are sort of just kind of the overview of how it's changed without getting too detailed.
Now I'm going to modify this one a little bit specific to our theme. So what injury have you had in this preparation for SFG II, if any, and did it change your training?
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, so we were about 3 weeks out, we were in the last month of training and stuff. I had to back off completely because just was working in on the press, continuing to try to get towards the 40 and stuff in preparation for testing on Saturday and everything. And just, pushed it a little bit too hard and had to take a couple of days off and rest. Elbow, shoulder started getting a little bit sore, muscle soreness. And that was just kind of a reminder again to myself that, some of the people I've talked to, just listen to them. Leave your ego at the door. If your body's not feeling it that day, just stop, put the bells down, come back the next day. Don't chase the reps. Don't chase them. So it wasn't a specific injury, but it was more like I had to back off because I was probably, if I pushed myself anymore, I would have gotten injured. I just was having a lot of muscle soreness and joint in the shoulder and the right elbow and stuff from pressing. So I went and got a couple of massages and got a lot of soft tissue work done, which is very, very helpful.
Awesome. So what's one thing high school athletes should be doing more of to complement their training and health?
I would say they should be playing multiple sports. And, I don't know if this is something they can control, but hopefully getting, training or coaching on, just how to be athletic development. So moving better, teaching them the fundamentals. They've got plenty of time to really focus on being a high level performer in a given sport. When they're younger, they should just focus on moving well, having fun, developing those qualities. And then as they get older and figure out if they really truly want to be serious, then they can. That's what I would say.
I agree 100% with that one. So what's your best tip to improve recovery from a training session? I know you mentioned massage before, but anything else you have?
Yeah. So soft tissue work, I think, is super, super important. So, beyond the foam roller, a very good manual therapist. I'm very lucky. My mother and sister are massage therapists. So I have a really big appreciation for good manual therapy. I think it does a ton for recovery and improving and maintaining tissue quality. That was one of the things that I was doing is I had a really good relationship with a massage therapist in Rhode Island, and we would trade services. I would train him once a week and he would give me a massage. And so every Thursday I was getting a massage, and then I do my heavy pressing session on Friday. I feel like $1 million every time I walked into the gym on Friday. So the other thing I would say besides that is really, dial in your nutrition and your sleep. Take the time to look at, make sure you're getting enough protein. So one of the things I learned this past spring, I went to Fit Soul Fit Body seminar with Mark Allen, and he gave some really good insight to, his Ironman World Championships victories. And he talked a lot about, if he was still hungry, he usually was probably deficient in not getting enough protein, during the day, and just some of those things. And I just started paying a lot more attention to how I was feeling and listening to my body and what it was trying to tell me I needed. That's important, and that made a big difference. So adjusting those things and sometimes keeping track of it. Using like MyFitnessPal or Lose It, like those apps, to get a baseline and establish how much protein, whatever meals you're having throughout the day. That can be a huge clue. Like, if you're not getting enough, you might have the greatest program design in the world, but you're not fueling your body properly to perform. So look at the data. Look at the data is probably what's going to help.
Now, speaking of food, what is your favorite meal?
Oh man, well, I love food. So I've had to, cut back the calories as I've gotten down in weight and stuff. So recently, I've been eating a lot more cod. fish, which is really good. So I've been baking that in the oven. That's really good. But if I had to pick like one food I could have in it, I love a great grilled steak.
Excellent. Yeah, I was worried there for a second that you were going to stop with cod. I was like,
No.
The last meal in your life, you're gonna ask for cod.
No. Steak, man. Yeah, steak.
Okay.
Love steak.
Excellent. All right. So one book that everyone should read.
Oh man. Fit Soul, Fit Body. Read Fit
Who's
Soul.
that by?
Mark Allen and Brant Secunda. Read that book. That's really, really good because there's a lot of the principles of StrongFirst in there. Listening to your body, honoring yourself. It really kind of gets more into it's not a training book. It's more about like leading a healthy life and the mindset and how to kind of reconnect with people and nature. Tap into these different keys to have much more balance across your life and how to deal with, all these different types of stressors. So that was a huge, huge help for me this past year.
Excellent. So last question of the rapid fire, and let's try to keep this one under an hour because I know you have a lot for this question. So who do you study or have studied in your career? I know there's a lot, but who are some of the highlights?
Well, I'll just keep it simple. Let's just say anybody at StrongFirst. Brent Morehouse, Stu McGill, Cook. Yeah, that's like what comes to the top of my mind right now immediately.
Awesome. So you have survived the rapid fire round. How's it feel?
Good. I'm glad I'm off the hot seat, man. I hope, it's, I love doing this stuff. I take it very seriously. So hopefully I gave some people in my ramblings and, ADD mindset, there were some things they could pick out that are useful to them in their training and their practice.
Oh, absolutely. There's a ton of gold in there, and I think you're going to do great at the level 2 in a couple of days, and it will be excellent to hopefully follow up and get your after action review of the weekend. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a ton of fun. I'm really looking forward to catching up with everybody that's going to be there and seeing Matt again. The cool thing about these experiences, the SFG I, the SFB, and the level 2 now, they've all been wonderful experiences. They've all been completely different learning experiences. Each one's changed me a little bit, always for the better. So I've always walked away with learning a lot more about myself as an athlete and a coach, and like taking with me how to, improve at training and coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And we say at StrongFirst that strength has a higher purpose, and I think it very much comes through in the way these different certifications are run.
Absolutely, man. 100%.
That concludes part 1 of the interview. You'll now hear from myself and Dr. Matt Rice immediately after we have finished the StrongFirst Level 2 Kettlebell Certification. Hey, we're coming to you from the hotel room after completing the StrongFirst Level 2 Kettlebell Certification. This is Joe DeLeo, host of the Leo Training Podcast, and I'm here with my good friend Matt Rice, Dr. Matt Rice, who traveled in from California for the StrongFirst Level 2 Kettlebell Certification. So I'm super pumped to have Matt here. Matt and I are going to kind of walk you through both of our perspectives over the course of the weekend, as well as just kind of taking you through traveling in and a breakdown of our thoughts and takeaways from each day. So Matt, thanks for coming back on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So let's just kick things off. The cert was on Saturday and Sunday. You and I both got into town on Thursday. So let's just kind of talk about that a little bit. So I'll let you kind of start off with that one.
Yeah, so it was a really good idea on your behalf to come in as early as Thursday, because I probably would have come in Friday. which would have been a disaster given kind of what happened. So it rained. It rarely rains where I live, and on the way to LAX, it rained that morning, and so traffic was awful. So my by the time I got there, I missed my flight, and so got delayed another 3 hours for the next flight, and then after that, that plane was delayed another hour and a half. So I didn't end up getting in till pretty late.
Yeah.
You picked me up from the airport, but by the time we got there, it was pretty late. We were both tired, and so we were just happy that we didn't have to get up that next morning at 6 a.m. and go train. So it was good. We had the next day, which was Friday, just kind of relax, chill. Joe took me around a couple different sites in Philly and Valley Forge, right?
Yep.
And then we got actually a little bit of training in, which was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Matt was supposed to actually get in right around the same time. So we both were supposed to arrive around 5 p.m. or just after 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Matt woke up 4:30 Pacific Standard Time. As he said, flight was delayed. He didn't arrive on the East Coast until I think 9:15 or 9:30 at night. So pretty much an entire full day of travel. So Friday we both, slept in. I took him to Valley Forge. We also saw the Rocky Steps, Philadelphia Museum of Art. Got in a little bit of just kind of light movement practice with a 16 kilogram bell in Valley Forge. And just, took it easy and took it as a recharge day and stuff, and got away from any type of training and just movement flow, that type of thing, and rested up. And then Saturday morning, got ready to go for beginning of level 2.
You felt ready, right? When Saturday came around, you felt good, ready.
Yeah, so we both got really good rest on Friday, had a good meal, woke up Saturday ready to go. Check-in was at 7:30 for the weigh-in. So for those that don't know, I made the decision. You can catch this in another interview. I'll link to it. But I made the decision in July to kind of continue my journey of fat loss. And I was 211 pounds May 1st, and I weighed in the morning of level 2 at 180.2 pounds. So I had lost 31 pounds. So my pressing weight was the 40 kilogram bell. So we got there. We had about, after we got going, about 30 minutes to kind of warm up, test our half body weight press. And then after that, we got in the snatch test. I did not hit my half body weight press. Matt, you want to take you through kind of yours?
Sure. Yeah. So, like Joe said, first thing in the morning we started with our, one arm half body weight press, and then the snatch test.
Mm-hmm.
I passed my press and the snatch test. The press for me was relatively easy just because of the type of preparation, things that I was doing for that. I felt strong there, but I also didn't have to cut 30 pounds before, so I had that going for me. Snatch test was easier for me this time than level 1. The difference for me was the breathing. I met with a master SFG and talked to him and shared some of my concerns about my breathing during the snatch test, specifically towards the end of the snatch test when I would be gassed. The biomechanical breathing match would be off, and I had other concerns about stuff like that. So some of the things that helped me was, I would get very intense before doing the snatch test. So I would kind of hype myself up. I would try and get really, amped up and then go at it, and I felt doing that really affected my breathing. It made me moving in this really this kind of like adrenaline state that really didn't carry over well for an endurance thing like that. Even though it's only 5 minutes, it's, a consecutive movement like that. So when I started actually calming myself down and relaxing before doing the snatch test in practice, in the same way I did then, I found that I was able to control my breath, which made me use less energy. And I just, I was able to pace myself better and ended up finishing and not having much of an issue with the snatch test.
Excellent. Yeah, I can kind of echo some of those similar sentiments. I felt between the strength work that I've been doing with kettlebells to prepare for the weekend, as well as the running that I was doing on the endurance end, my conditioning all around was much better than it was going into the level 1, and that was very high. This is probably the easiest, most control I felt executing the snatch test, just in terms of energy output and efficiency. And then after I had finished, within a couple of minutes, I was easily walking around. Whereas I can think back and remember the first couple of times I did it, I was like completely spent afterwards, like sitting down on the ground, just needing to recover. So then after that, we had a short break, and then we got into kind of level 1 review, and we really focused on 3 of the 6 skills taught. We touched on everything, but the focus was on the swing, the get up, and the double clean. And after kind of going through the entire weekend, the reason that so much emphasis placed on those skills, in my opinion, was because those are going to be foundational for all the level 2 stuff. You're going to be addressing overhead mobility in the get up. The swing, you're going to be working on that powerful hip extension, and then the double clean is basically, that's the rack position for double snatch, double push press, jerk. So that stuff feeds directly into that.
Absolutely. Yeah. The thing that I learned after we started doing the double cleans, the thing that I really liked was the grip position, how we talked about like the placement of the handle and stuff. But clean being the transition to like all those lifts. So the push press, the jerk, all those things. You start in that rack position. So the way I was holding the bells in the rack position was different coming in to when we actually learned that. So the rack position, when I would hold, placement of the thumb and index was not in the same position as we talked about yesterday. And that's something that actually, as I learned yesterday, really helps you with doing the push press and the jerk. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest takeaways of the weekend for me as well, was when doing the push press and the jerk, having the handle of the kettlebell. It's probably, if you can imagine, more of a diagonal angle across from the webbing where the thumb is across the palm, versus when you're doing maybe the get up or the military press, that handle is parallel to your calluses. And so that change in angle really allows you, as Matt said, to get underneath and explode up with the push press or dip under for the jerk. As well as the other thing that we kind of, after making those adjustments, once those bells were overhead, they were actually in a much more solid position. They wouldn't wobble as much.
It was easier to hold, and also, so the placement, when we have it kind of, as Joe said, angled across the palm, when you have it in that position for the push press and the jerk, your arms are slightly more relaxed. So when you're like holding it overhead, when you have to do multiple reps, pushing it up overhead, the arms don't fatigue as much as they would in a strict press. When
Right.
you're doing a strict press, your grip, your forearm, your shoulder, everything is lit. It's basically fired up and working. For the push press and the jerk, it's more of a lower body movement, so that the arms are kind of just more relaxed, guiding the bells upward as opposed to doing the majority of the work.
100%. Yeah, it's a great distinguishing point there. And that was actually another thing that some of the assistants said to me was, don't be afraid to, once you got the bells in the rack position, your elbows are set, you get into that dip, don't be afraid to kind of let your hands relax, almost like, I think of playing piano, so that as you explode up, you're not
expending unnecessary energy gripping the bell, which I was doing. So that was super helpful as well. And I guess kind of the other thing that before we moved into the push press and jerk, we spent a ton of time talking about breath, addressing overhead mobility, so revisiting and doing the Bretzel, arm bar, all those things to really open up thoracic spine, thoracic rotation, thoracic extension, even doing some very light kind of overhead quarter squat dips to just think about going into a little bit of extension with the T-spine specifically. And those were great drills.
Yeah, it helped me because coming into this, my worst or most difficult lift for me was the double jerk, because when I went up in weight, I had a challenging time keeping both bells directly overhead with my arms locked out, symmetrical. And after incorporating a lot of the just mobility stuff and patterning that sort of thing with all the skills and drills that they had us do, it felt much easier for me to do. So I feel if I continue those sort of things, I'll be much better at that.
Yeah. Same for me. I had such an easier time getting into the overhead position and was already fairly comfortable. But what I noticed is that as I fatigued, I was actually able to stay in the position I needed to, and wasn't changing while I was overhead. So as a result of that, I wasn't fatiguing, say, more of the front of the rotator cuff, because I wasn't allowing the bells to drift forward anymore because I wasn't changing position. So doing that overhead mobility work and then just practicing that stuff in that progression, that sequence we covered was great. Is there anything else you want to touch on from day one before we go into like day two?
Bottom up variation, that was it.
Yeah, day one. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was one of the other things we covered.
So I like that. So we both done bottom up variations. I like that one drill where they had us practice putting your weight on the bell, because that kind of changes how you grip it. And it's very true. If I were to just grab the bell and do a bottoms up clean to a press, I would possibly hold it in a slightly different position than I would if I was supporting my body weight. So that test that they had us do, where we kind of almost, if you can imagine doing like a push-up position on the bells, like you're going to do like a renegade row, that position is kind of the most balanced and stable position for your hand and the bell. And so when we were practicing all the lifts that way, it felt much more controlled and stable.
Yeah, that changed the bottoms up clean position for me as well, because like you said, you got that nice plumb line going from wrist, elbow, and then shoulder once you got to the top of the press. And the thing I noticed too was that once I got into the clean position, previously I would have like a second where I kind of had to find, getting the bell centered, and like that was gone. It was just there.
Yep.
So that was kind of a really cool nuance that resulted in a big change. But yeah, so that was all kind of some of the major takeaways from the first day. And then the second day, and we also covered the double snatch and did some progressions for that as well. So we covered the first day, bottoms up series, double snatch, push press, and jerk. And then morning of the second day, we had the windmill and the bent press. We started with the bent press and stuff and worked all those progressions. And that was fantastic. Woke up, felt like little soreness, good soreness in the shoulders and the lats on day two, but felt really good overall conditioning wise. And then we got into the progressions for the bent press, and just going through those, I couldn't believe again like how good my body felt. Just completely opened up. So that was I really enjoyed those. That was a lot of fun, and that has become pretty quickly, I think, going to be one of my new favorite skills to practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those are good for just people in general, even if you're not training kettlebells. Like I've been using some of those since I learned those in preparation for this. I've been using those with like patients of mine just for shoulder and thoracic mobility, or teaching people kind of like alignment and linkage, and teaching them how to, use their body for leverage and things like that. So like getting into some of those half kneeling, bent press kind of preparation movements, we were doing a lot of things that were opening up the hips, putting your body in a way that really improves thoracic rotation and extension, and even improves like opening up your chest and shoulders and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, and the other thing, feeding back into the point we made earlier of a lot of those postures that we're in are, an open half kneeling. That's a position that you are in right for the get up. So that's why that skill is so important, because it's going to be used again for the stuff in level 2 to help teach some of those foundations, and also for the windmill and stuff. So that stuff was great. And then anything else? Kind of major takeaways. And we had the skills testing for level 2. That was great. Felt really confident going into that. And then lunch break, and then we did a bunch of the athletic drills, which were a lot of fun. That was cool.
Yeah, that's cool. So I guess, so after this, what's going to change? What are you going to add in, take away, or do differently? What sort of things do you feel like are going to help your training and the way you train others?
Totally. So couple immediate things. So I still have to, I have 6 months. I got to complete my half body weight military press. So it'll be 40 kg. So couple takeaways from this weekend, specifically regarding the press. One I already touched on was kind of the handle position across the palm. One of the other reasons that is so important is when you're doing military press, if you have it more on that diagonal, and I've had reps this has happened, the bell will actually start to kind of rotate around the wrist, and you'll lose the rep. So that was a huge takeaway from me, kind of making sure that I have my hand properly positioned. That's something I'm going to be much more conscientious going forward. Also, as I'm pressing, thinking about keeping the palm facing towards my body or my face. And sometimes I probably don't even think about it, but as I'm pressing with a lighter bell, I'll turn my palm kind of away from my body. And you can get away with it and cheat a little bit with a lighter weight. But as you get up, I'm getting into that position now where the bell is going to rotate it around the hand. I'm going to lose position, and it's a lost rep. So those 2 points I think are going to be really crucial in helping me with getting the military press from a technical standpoint. The other thing is just all the continued focus on all of the fundamentals and progressions and regressions of working the different postures and how they can kind of help the higher level skills. It was really good, I think, for me to kind of take some of those skills apart and just work on what I would think of as just kind of pieces or parts of it rather than the whole thing. And you'd be surprised at like how much cleaner and sharper those skills feel when you go back and do the whole thing. How about you, man?
Definitely. So going to continue doing a lot of the bottoms up variations, carries, presses, get-ups. I'm going to make an effort to consistently train kind of heavier get-ups and also light get-ups, but spending more time in each position like we talked about. Let's see what else. The bent press, definitely practicing the bent press more, the windmill, continue doing that. I'm going to start doing a lot more of like a double clean and jerk type complex. The one arm snatch, the one arm clean with the reverse lunge, those kind of two ballistic movements we went over during the athletic skills portion. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I just something to add to what I said. I got some great tips from Matt, like when we were practicing on Friday, just kind of shaking out the plane ride and travel and everything. And, we just had a 16 kilogram bell, and we were just doing basically from, seated
side bent sit,
side bent sit position with the kettlebell in the rack, and then kind of coming up, extending the hips, pressing from that position, stepping into half kneeling, pressing from that position, going to standing, pressing from that position, and then reverse of those actions, either doing the press in the reverse as well, or just keeping it in the rack, but really moving through all those different postures, keeping the trunk tight. Yes, it's a lighter load, but it's kind of forcing you to work in different planes of movement that I wouldn't normally be in, especially when you're pressing a lot. So that was, a big takeaway from Matt that I'm going to kind of integrate into some of my training. And then just kind of re-emphasizing the importance of waiving the load throughout the week. You want to go heavy on your heavy days, but don't be afraid on the light days to kind of, walk out of the session feeling completely recharged and like you could have done a lot more. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's actually a good thing.
Yep.
Cool, man. I don't have anything else to add unless Matt does.
No, I think we covered it.
Yeah, so hopefully you guys find some value in some of the stuff we shared from our level 2 experience, both on the preparation, travel end, and then over the course of the weekend, some of the stuff you might learn. Definitely recommend and encourage you to attend the CERT. It will refine and sharpen all of your kettlebell skills from level 1 and level 2, and you'll learn a ton. That's going to make you a better teacher and coach.
And possibly change your life.
There you go. Awesome. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.